If we could have Tunstall Healthcare to the table, that'd be great. With a quorum, and this is going to be Parliament is in both houses is sitting, so there's going to be members in and out. It'll look crazy, but it seems to work. And there's a vote pending in the lower house at 8 o'clock roughly, so I don't think it'll affect you, but anyone else who's here, it may affect them. But bear with us, we will get enough on the record, I hope. So I declare open this public hearing of the Joint Committee on the National Broadband Network. Before calling the first witnesses, I ask a committee member to move that the media be allowed to film the proceedings today in accordance with the rules set down for committees, which include not taking footage or still images of members' papers or laptop screens. Thank you, Deputy Chair. I'd also like to welcome, but he's not here, new member Senator Dean Smith from Western Australia to the committee. Tonight we intend to start by looking at some matters related to the rollout by hearing from Tunstall Healthcare and then Professor Jan Thomas. At 8 p.m, representatives from Telstra will appear and our focus will turn on to the ongoing issues around Telstra workforce retraining. So I now welcome the witnesses from Tunstall Healthcare. For the Hansard record, could you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Thank you, Mr Oakeshott. My name is Gary Morgan from Tunstall Healthcare. I'm the Health Services Director. One of my colleagues, Jeff Feeks.
My name is Jeff Feeks. I'm the Chief Information Officer of Tunstall Healthcare Australasia.
My name's Lisa Kapamaj and I'm the Marketing and Strategy Implementation Manager for Tunstall Healthcare Australasia.
Okay, thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I advise you that these hearings are formal proceedings of Parliament and warrant the same respect as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Would you like to make an opening statement to the committee?
Thank you, Mr Oakeshott. I'd like to make an opening statement. I'd like to thank the members of the committee for their time and attendance this evening. Tunstall Healthcare is the world's largest provider of medical emergency alarms. It's a company that was established over 55 years ago in the United Kingdom. We operate in 30 countries. We have 200 plus emergency response centres around the world. And globally, we look after about 2.5 million patients and clients around the world. With the material we have with my colleagues tonight, we've got some packs that we would like to table. Mr Oakeshott, for the members of the committee to take away with them, some information about Tunstall and some information about people who use the Tunstall services. In the Asia Pacific region, we have some 90,000 clients who are monitored from our emergency response centre in Brisbane and one in New Zealand. We have 72,000 monitored clients, patients here in Australia, and we have nearly 14,000 veterans who have their daily care managed by Tunstall Healthcare for the Department of Veterans in Australia and Affairs. Medical alarm users or clients are typically aged or at-risk people. They have an emergency medical alarm in their home to help them live an independent life, keeping them out of aged care facilities and hospitals. In our Brisbane Emergency Response Centre, we take over 2,000 emergency calls per day. An average of 500 to 600 calls of those a week require emergency assistance. Tunstall Healthcare, on behalf of those clients, will call an ambulance, we'll call the fireys, we'll call the police and so forth. Our submission was motivated by our desire to ensure the safety of our clients is not compromised during the transition across to the National Broadband Network. Tunstall has been working closely with the NBN code to achieve this. The Industry Association estimates there are over 250,000 personal medical alarms in Australia. As of today's count, we have 136 of our clients or so are living in the NBN footprint. They're eligible, they've taken up the NBN service, and by June next year we estimate that 2,000 of our clients will be on the NBN. What I'd like to do now is invite Jeff Feeks, our Chief Information Officer, to talk to some of the concerns that we raised in our submission.
Thank you, Gary. As highlighted in the packs that have been distributed around, Tunstall made 6 recommendations in our submission. These were motivated purely to ensure that our clients get their emergency help when they require it and when they need it. Of the 6 recommendations which are listed today, we predominantly wanted to talk about 3. These 3 are around the establishment of a code of conduct for the RSPs, the establishment of a free call number as an advocacy advisory, and also some discussion points around the AS4607 standard. The submission, since we submitted the letter, there have been a few changes to the rollout of NBN and our understanding what's currently been provisioned. These are predominantly around the informed consent to the battery backup. It's not an opt-in or an opt-out anymore. It's predominantly an informed consent. The recent decision, we believe, to power the data points of the network termination unit during a mains failure, we see as a positive. And also a modification to the auto shutdown functionality from 30% to 50% of remaining battery life during a mains failure. The establishment of a code of conduct for the RSPs was related predominantly to the fact that most users of medical alarms are elderly and generally technology shy. Our concern is that there are some clients who unknowingly or unwittingly may sign up to an RSP who cannot support their medical alarm or deliver the service they require. We would like to see some safeguards in place to protect the vulnerable customer, to ensure that the RSPs adhere to a duty of care for the service they provide. We would also suggest that it is mandatory that the RSP investigates the client's requirements before signing them up to a contract. Further to this, we would suggest that code of conduct sets some responsibility of the RSP in relation to the installation of the medical alarm. 2 other points that we'd like to raise on the code of conduct are the 10-day cooling off period that we understand is currently legislated. We believe that the elderly and some users of the medical alarms may benefit from having that code of conduct extended to 30 days to give them a greater chance to review the requirements, and also for there to be a review of the financial impact that may be on the client if they pick a service that does not meet their medical alarm requirements. In relation to the establishment of a free call number, we believe it's important that every medical alarm patient, client and resident of Australia has a advocacy service in regards to the benefits and what NBN is actually deploying, as opposed to being an industry representation or an RSP provision service. So that way a client can get actually true information in regards to what NBN's about and what the benefits to them and what their requirements are. In relation to standard AS4607, which is the standard for medical alarms and in Australia, the section we refer to predominantly is about battery backups. The current AS4607 provides a requirement for 40 hours of battery capacity or battery backup to be provided to the medical alarm during a mains failure or a power failure.
Keep going.
Currently,
We're going to have to suspend. I apologise for this. Have we got 2 committee or subcommittee?
No, we can't.
We can't. Okay. We're going to have to suspend.
We'll just keep going. Keep going.
Suspend because we have to go.
Everybody has to go.
The senators can stay. I don't do anything anymore.
I love some water.
Hand it over to Senator Cameron and to look after while we go and do this, but we'll be back as quick as we can.
No worries.
That's my quiet supper gone. Yeah, thanks. So if you'd like to continue, it'll be on the Hansard record. And
No worries. Coming back to the AS4607 standard, which is about the provision of battery backup to a medical alarm during a mains failure or power failure. The standard at this stage highlights a requirement for 40 hours, and that's what the medical alarm actually delivers to every medical alarm user in the country. It is our understanding that the existing NBN NTD, or power supply unit, I should clarify, will supply approximately 6 to 8 hours of battery backup in the event of a mains failure. That's significantly less than the 40 hours that is currently provisioned. Obviously, That is a significant difference in regards to what can be provided to a client during a power failure or an outage of power in Australia. The concern we have about that is obviously exposure to the patient. Several points that we've raised previously is in relation to the NBN and the safeguard for the client and the resident. We understand that there are some solutions that the NBN are actually legislated or attempting to get legislated through the government. These include the extending of the battery runtime to be approximately 30 hours or greater. We also understand that they are working with the RSPs on who's responsible for the battery management, whether or not it's the end user or whether or not the RSPs, as in the Telstra's, Optuses and Sky Meshes, will actually have some role in that. And there's also some requirements for the modification to the power supply unit that connects to the NTD itself to have a more generic plug so that alternative power supplies can also be sorted. To summarise very briefly, our presentation was predominantly around ensuring that our clients and medical alarm clients can actually make an emergency call when they need to. Back to you, Gary.
Thanks, Senator Cameron. So Tunstall Healthcare is here with our submission tonight to ensure that our clients, the at-risk clients, the elderly of Australia, the clients that we represent and the clients who use other services from other vendors are able to access emergency help when and when they need it.
Well, yeah, thanks. Either Mr. Peaks, is it?
Feeks.
Peaks? Mr. I have to put my glasses on.
No, that's fine. I'm right with it.
Tunstall Healthcare, you are not simply suppliers and monitoring of alarms, are you?
Lisa?
In terms of we supply medical alarms, we manufacture medical alarms, and we also provide a 24-hour monitoring service.
Right. So alarms is your main game?
Alarms is our main game, yes.
Yeah. Now, isn't there opportunities under NBN for companies like yourselves who are already in the medical healthcare area to sort of widen the scope of your market and the base of the company?
Absolutely. Tunstall Healthcare globally has some 50,000 clients and patients who are using our services for telehealth services in Europe and North America. And here in Australia, we're currently rolling out some 8 or 9 telehealth projects. Some of those are in the NBN area, and some of those are serving states like the state of Tasmania.
I want to come back to that, but I just want to touch on the issue of the battery. I suppose battery technology, as I understand, it's changing continually. So lithium-ion batteries, for instance, have got very long life.
Yes.
So in terms of batteries, the technology, I think, will eventually, if not already, solve the problem that you're raising, wouldn't it?
It is our understanding that the battery that's supplied with the power supply unit is a lead-acid battery, and it's not my understanding that NBN are actually provisioning any other alternate battery supplies at the moment, other than their recommendation for legislative approval to actually look at other power sources. So as battery technology changes, yes, they will adhere to that, but their current unit they're supplying supports about 6 to 8 hours of battery supply to the NTD during a mains fail.
So given this is fundamental to your business plan, have you looked at what alternatives could be implemented by your company?
At a technical level, we've actually addressed and looked at what other alternatives there are around. The concern, I suppose, we have in regards to battery management is that our clients are generally elderly. It's not just about the supply of a battery, it's about the management of the battery and the alerts and how the client actually gets the service they require. So at the moment, under AS 4607, our batteries inside our alarms last for 40 hours. On the existing infrastructure in place now, prior to NBN, during a mains fail, we'll actually get their alarms called through for more than 40 hours, and 40 hours is our minimum. with the introduction of NBN, as soon as the power supply unit itself loses power, well, the NTD loses power, there'll be no telephony in or out of that device. Currently, it's my understanding that there's only the power supply unit and the certified cable that are allowed to be used, and there's no modification to those at this stage.
There's no modifications.
It is our understanding from NBN that it's
Is
legislated.
that your understanding, or is that the facts? I mean,
I believe it's the fact. At this stage, I believe there's legislation from NBN that they're asking for advice or approval to seek alternate ways that they can power the NTD.
well, NBN don't legislate, we legislate.
And that's why I said seeking legislation.
We're seeking legislation. Well, that's an interesting point, and I'm glad you've raised it. I just don't see I can't see any reason technically why there can't be, for people who are reliant, as your clients are, on long-term response under battery in some circumstances. We can't have Li-ion batteries that provide more than 40 hours.
I mean, we've been working very closely with NBN, and NBN have attended our industry representation meetings and are fully aware of our concerns, and I believe that they are addressing those and seeking legislation to actually address those concerns moving
So
forward.
you're happy with NBN's response?
I'm happy that they are progressing the requirement that we would like to see for extended battery life, and they have a couple of alternatives they're looking at to achieve that for us. As an industry, I think as Gary highlighted, there's about 250,000 patients in Australia relying on the medical alarm daily.
Okay. Now, I don't think I can take that point any further. The other issue that you've raised is telehealth and how you deal with telehealth in Europe. Does the NBN allow you to provide better and extra services to your clients?
Absolutely. In fact, the development of the NBN in Australia prompted Tunstall to develop a new integrated telehealth system, which is soon to be taken internationally off the back of the NBN, because Australia really pioneered the way in terms of broadband type technologies. And now the UK is starting to roll out broadband in geographic areas, and some of the telehealth programs are looking to now integrate the technologies that we've developed here in Australia into their broadband telehealth programs in the UK and Europe.
From my point of view, we see the NBN as a real enabler to provide a lot richer service than we've had provision previously. We've always had a limited bandwidth in Australia, and now with NBN we get a greater bandwidth, so we can deliver a lot richer services, including video conferencing, the multi-party video conferencing. We can include remote telehealth services now, which several years ago weren't enabled.
Okay. Senator Gallagher.
Thanks. I note that your business functions internationally. So, is there any areas where they are ahead of what we're doing here in Australia in terms of, fibre to the home and medical or telehealth provision? Is there any areas you're involved in that have actually got fibre and you're using it, and there's solutions found to the problem you just raised?
We have certain regions, obviously, for example, Denmark, I believe, have had fibre to the home on services for a prolonged period of time, but predominantly it's broadband based. So a lot of telephony services aren't deployed that way at this stage. We know that the UK are actually looking at a lot of fibre based services, and similar to what Lisa said before, because of the NBN, we've been able to deliver some feature rich services which globally Tunstall are looking at taking to other markets as well. As a globe, we believe that everybody's moving down faster broadband. We know that New Zealand are looking at a very similar type solution at this stage too. So as technology develops, we see that globally these services will be rolled out. Predominantly, maybe the reason that Australia is ahead is because of the size of the country and what we actually have to try and achieve, which is a little bit different to a lot of the established European countries.
And additionally, and particularly in the UK, they're still running the telephony service over POTS parallel to the broadband service, so they still have the traditional, telephone services parallel.
There must be other companies, businesses in the marketplace that rely on a backup battery system too, outside of telehealth. What are their concerns the same as yours, or have they solved it? Or
We're a member of PERSA, which is the Personal Medical Alarm Association for Australia. All of our members have met with NBN, and NBN have attended our meetings. As an industry, obviously, we adhere to AS4607 as a standard, with the provision of the battery backup inside the NTD or for NBN, and that's been reduced. Our industry is concerned about that, and I believe that other groups have submitted letters as well in regards to that.
is there any actual examples of where the new standards, if you like, would impinge on patient health? I mean, if it's going from 40 hours back up down to
6 to 8.
6 or 8, I mean, how often do we lose the power for 6 or 8 hours?
So the standard is 40 hours, and with our 72,000 clients and patients around the country, in the last 12 months we've had some 22,000 power outages notified to our emergency response centre. So if you do the mathematics, Senator Gallagher, you'll see that we have some 60 patients and clients who are impacted by power outages every day here in Australia. So if you think about what's happening in the bushfire season, what happens in the floods.
I'm actually on 2 committees. The committee next door is inquiring into electricity, so I zap in there and ask them what the length of a power outage is on average.
So,
And that actually varies a lot from metropolitan to rural and regional areas. Our experience during the cyclones and during floods, we found metropolitan
I can
areas.
obviously accept the floods, the cyclones, the long-term disasters, but I'm just wondering about the actual instances of power outages over 6 hours in any capital city or rural, town.
Yeah, outside of natural disasters, I think is the question.
So, Senator, we record the outages, and we've had 22,000 or so power outages with our clients over the last 12 months.
And they've exceeded 6 hours?
I'd have to take that question on notice and come back to you with the duration, but we're recording it as an event.
I think outside of your business, like an alarm system would have a battery backup for security of premises. I mean, they would have a bigger problem than you, wouldn't they?
I'm sure ASIAL, which are the security industry, probably have very firm beliefs around the battery as well. I suppose part of the concern we have is, because we look after a lot of elderly patients or the patients who actually need assistance, and I think there's a couple of case studies in the pack that Lisa's got, that actually are, to a certain extent, have 7 by 24-hour carers where possible. The problem is that if they lose power during the night, for example, with a 40-hour battery, if you lost power at 8 o'clock at night, we will get notified that they've lost power, but we know that they'll have power in the morning, so we don't wake them up to say, Margaret, you've lost power at this stage. So we can get through the night and we can work with the client, we can work with the family the next day to address those issues when they are larger than the 6 hours. The problem with having a smaller window, if a power failure happens at, say, 8 o'clock at night, potentially there's no power for the client to press the medical alarm button at 4 o'clock in the morning with no notification. So from our point of view, it exacerbates a risk to the client with not having the extended battery backup. And we understand the concern about are the failures an hour or 40 hours. The concern still is actually the client in the home, and as we most know, 2 o'clock in the morning when you lose power, it's a little bit disorientating for the patient.
No, I fully understand the seriousness of any power outage for someone who's totally dependent on their medical alarm.
This is not just the alarm. Some of your patients would be reliant on power for other medical devices as well.
Yes, potentially for other services.
And the alarm may be the last issue if there's a power outage, wouldn't it?
Yes, but through having the alarm, and because we have our whole case record of our clients, we're able to assist them in managing the risks around the other services that they may have that are reliant on electricity. So we're able to provide notification to the care agency, to family and friends and other responders or emergency services to provide alternative support to that person. So,
But regarding, I mean, a lot of these, some people may not be able to get to the alarm if there's a power outage. I'm just wondering, are you advised by the power companies if there is a medical assist, one of your clients, do the power companies advise you that there's a power outage?
no.
No, we received a notification before they would know.
Yes.
It's simultaneously.
When there's a mains fail, our alarms will actually detect there's a mains
Back
fail.
at yours go off, yeah.
And we will send a message to the monitoring centre, as will most alarm
Yeah.
monitoring companies who monitor alarms.
Just like the security companies do.
Yeah, so we will get that and we will know that the client's lost power.
And
In
we
the
can-
event of the power being restored, we will get a message back on that in some circumstances. So if we don't get a message back and a client's on NBN after 4 to 6 hours, that's part of the concern we have about how we also manage that.
Yeah, but what's your discussion? So NBN are talking to the government about a legislative amendment that's required on the battery. Is that?
Yes, correct. Currently, the battery is only provisioned on the Uni V port, not on the Uni D port, and so that's one of the issues that they're addressing is actually being able to provide the battery back up to the Uni D port as well.
Yeah, but even if you only had 6 hour backup, you'd be confident that your checks and balances would make sure the patient is looked after, wouldn't it?
We would put, we have already put procedures in place to support clients that have shorter backup battery time so that we can manage their risks on their behalf.
And there are, as I understand it, there's an aged care facility in Victoria connected to the NBN with fully functioning medical alarms. Are you aware of that? Anyone?
There's probably many villages that would be connected to the NBN that would have, or NBN-like services that have medical alarms.
And there's no threat to the safety because you know what the battery backup is, and if you were monitoring, you would take steps to deal with it if there was a blackout?
Yes, if they were our client, we would have an understanding of their particular situation and we would be able to manage that accordingly with the facility manager at that retirement village.
So there's no fundamental safety problem here for your clients at the moment. You simply want a more reliable, a more long-lasting battery.
I suppose the statement is that Australian Standard AS4607 is in place to provision a service for the medical alarm client and patient. I suppose what we're looking for is extending the battery backup that's currently provisioned by NBN to come back as close as we can to AS4607, that way providing the best outcome for the patient and the client so that we can actually get through a night or a period of time in the event of a mains fail.
Yeah, and an outcome for you. You want that 40 hours.
Ideally, we want the 40 hours. But currently, the other concern that we have is that there are clients that the RSPs have put in place that the RSP is not aware that the client has a medical alarm. Potentially, they've only provisioned a telephone over the data service, which doesn't currently have backup power, and the client may not be aware that their alarm won't work in the event of a power outage.
But there's still problems with the copper network as well, isn't there, in terms of your alarm systems?
It's a very reliable service.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
What are the implications of the...
Have to be the last question because we're over time.
Okay. So what are the implications of the 3 to 5 versus 36 to 40? Is it a financial reason that it's 3 to 6 hours?
I would suggest that it's probably part of the design that went into the power supply unit that was actually paired or designed with the NTD and the battery at that time. I presume that the design and the development of that device has been in the making for a while, and I'd suggest that they probably standardise on that battery as part of the development phase. Could they modify that? You'd have to talk to the designers of the equipment, but it is a strong recommendation that and a request that they extend the battery capacity as much as possible.
So, Senator, our motivation for the submission was to ensure that Australia's elderly and at-risk Tunstall's clients are able to access emergency services when they require it. The three key messages from our submission is that we'd like to see a code of conduct established. We'd like to see a 1-800 free call service for Australia's elderly and at risk to be able to phone and get information. And we'd like to see adherence to the Australian Standard 4607.
Okay, well, thanks very much. We're out of time, so thanks for
Thank you.
your
Thank you for the opportunity.
submissions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have the other witness here? Sorry, I'm sorry. I think
Thompson's
I think there's a formality that I don't normally do in the Senate, which is the. Do you want that?
Yeah, you just read that.
Okay. Look, just before you go, thanks for coming today to assist the committee. If you have been asked to provide additional information, could you please forward it to the Secretariat by Tuesday the 23rd of October? And if the committee has any further questions, they'll send you these in writing through the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Professor Thomas here? I now welcome Professor Thomas. Good evening, Professor.
Hello, good evening.
For the Hansard record, could you please state your name and address?
Professor Jan Thomas, Vice-Chancellor and President, University of Southern Queensland.
Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I advise you that these hearings are formal proceedings of the Parliament and warrant the same respect as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Would you like to make an opening statement to the committee?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate that the committee's interest to have me come to present at this public hearing was based on an article that I wrote for the Australian newspaper in June of this year. And I understand that the committee members have copies of that article, and I also had sent through a brief submission that adds more detail to the argument, but I also table copies of that submission in case they aren't to hand. The media article and the submission argue for the need for strategies to be put in place to ensure access to the NBN by financially disadvantaged university students within a reasonable timeframe. My view is that if these strategies are not forthcoming, then an opportunity to digitally enable the next generation of students and boost participation of low SES households in higher education is at risk of being missed. The committee will be aware of the efforts being made by the government over many years to increase higher education participation and attainment by students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. My university, the University of Southern Queensland, is particularly successful in serving a diverse student constituency. Some 30% of our students are from low SES postcodes, meaning that our student body is actually overrepresented for this group, which is significantly underrepresented in the sector overall. In other words, USQ is punching well above its weight in terms of provision of education to students of financial disadvantage. USQ has also been acknowledged as a leader in distance education over many years, and indeed some 70% of our students study away from a physical campus. As a result, we're major players in the online education space, and significantly, all of our academic programs are available online. So, of course, the NBN is of immense interest to us, not only because of its potential to provide improved education experiences for students studying with us, but for the majority of our students who access higher education opportunities from where they live. with a high proportion of these being from low SES, as I've indicated. So I have absolutely no doubt about the potential for NBN to enhance higher education. My concern, though, relates to the issue of equitable access by students to the NBN. Our situation is very simple. In catering for a high proportion of students from low SES backgrounds, we're obliged to base our academic program development on the lowest common denominator. The development of models that fully exploit the NBN is therefore dependent on our students having a high rate of access to the NBN. Anything less will result in a significant proportion of our students being disadvantaged. So just as a major issue for higher education equity 20 years ago concerned securing access to university per se by groups at the time which were underrepresented, a major issue today for equity in higher education is ensuring equitable access to the NBN. I'm concerned that the nature of the NBN rollout gives me a little confidence that we will be in a position to fully exploit the potential in the short to medium term, and that concerns me. The question is not just about the rate of rollout, but there are three aspects in the current rollout that cause me some concern, and they're detailed in my submission that you have. But in summary, firstly, the NBN corporate plan for 2012 to 2015, which was released in August of this year, indicates that the base level NBN access will cost equivalent to the current premium-based copper-based services. And my concern is that this will make NBN unavailable to students who are unable to afford a premium access service. In addition, all NBN retail service providers appear to require a minimum term contract, typically 24 months, which will serve to limit access for users with low housing stability. This will make NBN unavailable to students who are unable to commit to a 24-month internet service contract by the nature of their housing arrangements. Thirdly, there is currently a lack of clarity with regard to how the opt-out process will occur upon initial deployment of the NBN. It's not clear when copper services will be withdrawn following deployment, and I understand estimates range from 1 to 3 years. But it's also uncertain whether there'll be additional costs borne by individuals who initially opt out once they are obliged to connect to the NBN service upon removal of the copper service. And it's clearly possible in this scenario that disadvantaged people will be further disadvantaged during the awkward transition period. So the rollout strategy for the NBN appears to be predicated on growth at the faster service levels, further supporting its value to premium services and users able to pay for high-speed access. There is an assumption that this will eventually put downward pressure on prices in the longer term, but the time it will take to achieve high levels of access, particularly amongst the financially disadvantaged, appears to be very uncertain. The picture emerging is that there will be some degree of digital divide with respect to access to the NBN for some time into the future. As I noted earlier, without high access rates by USQ students to NBN, then we'll not be able to take advantage of the benefits of the network to provide improved learning experiences for students. Equity considerations will mean that USQ is obliged to base its learning and teaching strategies on technologies that students are more likely to possess, such as mobile devices. Hence, an opportunity to digitally enable a generation of students and boost participation of low SES households is at risk of being missed. So I'm calling for the Commonwealth to work with the sector, and particularly those universities which are very involved in online learning, to address the issue of access to NBN by low SES students as a basis for ensuring continued equitable access to the best possible quality higher education by the next generation of learners. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor. Just for my information, I suppose for the committee's information, what are you a professor in?
Well, at the moment I'm Vice-Chancellor, but my disciplinary background is veterinary science.
Vet science, okay. Thanks. Now, this article that you've written, was this your own research?
The article that was published in The Australian?
Yes, on the 13th of June.
It was researched by members of my staff.
Research, so these academics or?
No, professional staff in the areas of IT.
Okay, what's the qualifications?
I can't tell you offhand.
you
I'm sorry,
take that
I'll
on
have to
notice?
get back to you. I
Yeah,
will put that on notice, yep.
Yeah, thanks. So you didn't actually do the research for the article.
No.
You relied on your staff giving you accurate advice for the article.
Yes.
Did you check any of the advice?
I checked it as best as I was technically able to, but I'm not a technical person in that sense.
So this article is totally reliant on your administrative staff. It's not on the basis of your academic background or your expertise.
I have no disciplinary expertise in the area of IT.
Okay, thanks. Now, I'm a bit curious about some of the claims you've made in the article. Well, first let me ask you, did any of your staff consult the NBN to cross-check their research?
We spoke with the NBN Co after the article was published, but we did not, as part of the general research, speak directly to NBN. We just gathered information that was available publicly.
So where did you gather the information from?
I cannot say precisely, and I will have to get back to you.
So can you take that on notice as well? So you didn't consult NBN. You didn't consult. Did you consult anyone from government or any of the departments that are responsible for NBN?
I will get back to you on where the information was gathered.
Okay, thanks. Now, you say that an entry-level broadband user will face fees of about $60 a month on the NBN. What is this claim based on?
Well, if with the submission that was put forward electronically, and which I have some copies of here, that add further detail to the article, if you have a look at the comparative bundle pricing of NBN and compare it to ADSL, which is on page 2 of this document that was submitted, you'll see that that's around about where the figures start to cut in.
So this is this chart, is it? Exhibit 7.8?
Yes.
Can you explain that to me?
Well, that came from the NBN code, and basically what that's showing is the green is the range of bundled NBN plans in the market, separated into 3 groups depending on the speed across the bottom, and then the prices up the y-axis.
So and down the bottom there's a range $30 to $45.
The solid lines, the black lines, indicate the ADSL price plans.
And where do you see the NBN plan is on there?
The green, shaded green zones.
Oh, the shaded green zones.
Yeah.
So if you're down at the 1 to 100 gigabyte, under the current ADSL, you could be paying as high as $70 down at that lower end, and you're saying as low as $30.
Yes.
Right. And so are you aware that there are plans for NBN to start from $30 a month?
Not to that level of detail, no. My understanding was that ADSL, at the premium level of ADSL, equates to the entry level for NBN.
So you've written this article saying that students won't be able to afford NBN, basically. But you were unaware that NBN starts at $30 a month?
I think there are some issues too around the access in regional and remote, because my understanding is that with increased the retail outlets within metropolitan
Can we
areas.
just before we go to regional and remote, do you accept that there are plans by companies like Sky Mesh and Exetel who are offering 50 gigabytes of data from between $30 and $35 a month. Are you aware of that?
No.
So does that make any difference to your submission, or does it make any difference to the letter that you would have written if you'd have known that?
My concern, if that was available to all of our students, it would. My understanding, though, is that some of the competitive prices associated with a range of different retail service providers is more likely to occur in metropolitan areas and less likely to occur in regional and remote Australia, where our students are often located.
But are you aware of how NBN operates in terms of its wholesale pricing?
As I understand, there's a wholesale price that goes to every household of something of the order of $24.
Now, the wholesale price doesn't go to the household; it goes to the retailer. Are you aware how it works?
Senator, you might like to explain then.
No, I'm just asking you the questions, Professor. You've made the statements. I'm not trying to be difficult about this. I'm trying to help because you've made the statement that students won't get access because of the NBN, but you've told us tonight that you didn't do the research. It was your administrative staff who did the research, that you were unaware that there was retail packages out there of $30. You don't mention here line rental under copper. So I'm just wondering, why, to be honest, you were so ill prepared and why the Australian would publish this, because the facts are just not correct.
Excuse me, who is the chairman?
I'm chairing it. Oh, well, I'm not chairing it anymore.
No, when
Once
you finish, we'll hand it over, yeah?
Yeah, so...
Well, I'm just really asking, this witness has 10 minutes left and there are others of us that have questions.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just... So I'll go over that again because I was interrupted. You didn't do the research yourself. You relied on others to do the research. You didn't check with NBN or government as to whether it was factual, what you printed. You may change your position in terms of what you've put forward because of the facts that have just been advised to you. Is that correct?
Well,
I'm not bullying. I'm asking questions.
Senator, I appreciate that you have asked those questions, and I guess I was asked to come and speak. I didn't put a submission to this committee. I was asked to come and speak based on that article, which is what I am doing now.
Thank you.
You want me to take back over then?
Oh, sure.
No worries.
You're the chair.
So, Senator McDonald, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Professor, thanks for coming along, even although you didn't make a submission, and I enjoyed your article. I thought it was very, very good. I come from a regional area in Australia. Your students are principally from where?
Our students come from all over Australia because we have 70% of our students who study not on any particular campus, so are dependent on online. They might be located anywhere in Australia, but the majority of our domestic students would be located in regional Queensland.
Mm-hmm. And University of Southern Queensland has a reputation for, what do they call it, distance
Yes, distance education. We've been very strong providers for distance education for several decades.
Yes. And have your students sort of indicated to you whether or not they've looked into this and whether they feel that this is going to be a huge boost to them, both in speed and in money?
We are surveying students at the moment around their capacity to access various technologies, and it does vary substantially. There are a good number, I guess the majority of our online students would have ADSL too, but there are also a significant proportion who do not, who still have dial-up. Certainly in terms of the very special learning and teaching opportunities, for example, utilising Second Life, video clips, some of the higher download kind of materials that you might expect, that would significantly enhance the learning experience. But the learning experience can also be managed with a much lower download capacity.
I've just done a tour out in Western Queensland where I suspect, in fact I know some of your students come from. They're having to rely on a satellite
Yes.
process, even although in many instances the fibre line passes right through the little town they're in, Julia Creek being an example. Have you had any discussions with students about the use of satellite and how good that is and how expensive it is or otherwise?
I don't know the cost, Senator, but I do know our students who are in remote areas do rely on satellite for some of their materials, and to the best of my knowledge, there's it's fine, it's good.
The satellite.
Yeah,
connections.
I'm unaware of any particular issues with the satellite connections for our remote students.
What is your particular discipline, Professor?
My particular discipline is veterinary science.
Okay, fine. And well, I was going to ask you if you'd done the sums on, the cost of the NBN divided by the Australian public, and Senator Cameron was talking to you about different programs of as low as $30 a month. I hadn't heard of those, but I'm just wondering if you've heard of any of your students who are getting NBN at that price per month at the present time.
No.
No, I don't think you will.
Professor Thomas, can I just pick up on a couple of issues you've raised? And I think particularly the mobility of students is an important factor that you highlight here. From your understanding of your student body, just how mobile is the average student in terms of their frequency of moving house or relocating?
It tends to depend on which age group you're referring to. So for older, more mature workers who may be studying part-time whilst they're also in the workforce, tends to be more stable. But as we know, there is also an increasing mobility amongst the workforce too, with transfers and the like. I think my point around the concern that some students don't have certainty around their housing is more associated with the younger students who might be in share housing and those sorts of arrangements, which is very common for young students who aren't in a married situation or aren't in the workforce. And those students would quite regularly not necessarily have the same address for a period of 2 years that they could rely on.
Okay, so that poses obviously an impact in terms of their capacity to enter into contracts with communications providers. In terms of that demographic of student, from your appreciation, how often would it be that they have a fixed line phone service of any description into their house?
I don't have the statistics on that at all. My observation is students is that they are permanently connected to mobile phones, and I suspect, just anecdotally, they're becoming less and less likely to have fixed phones connected to the house than they are to have mobile phones. But it's only anecdotal. I do not have any statistics to back that.
And you, indeed, your submission that's been tabled today does highlight the areas of concern about the particular take-up of mobile devices, and that indeed you find that there's a much greater proportion, I think, of students with mobile devices that they seem to use for the predominance of their internet access. Is that okay? In terms of suggesting that you may need to direct university investment towards alternatives to the NBN that focus on these mobile devices, what type of thought is the university putting into this at present?
It's a significant part of our strategy to move to digitally enabled learning through the use of mobile technologies, and we're investing heavily into it. And we have significant funding too through structural adjustment funds to ensure students are well connected. So it's a major part of our ongoing business and also our developing strategy to maximise this.
So are you rolling out Wi-Fi services across campuses, that type of thing?
Yes, but 70% of our students don't come on campus, so our core business is actually students located in all sorts of locations. So we have to ensure that all our services are provided so that those students can pick that up as well in some way.
Right, okay. I
So,
knew it was significant. I didn't realise 70% is obviously...
70% of our students don't come on campus at all, and they will be located all over Australia and indeed the world. So our campus students are indeed a minority.
Okay. So remote learning is obviously at its core
Senator,
there.
just mindful of what Senator McDonald said, that we are finishing at 8 o'clock, and I'd like to get other members to have a go. So if you can make this your last question before I ask the member for Greenway to ask a couple of questions.
No problems, Chair. Well, Professor Thomas, look, just in closing, I guess, on that point, in dealing with that 70% of remote students, how often is it that they are, from your experience, juggling undertaking their classes and their learning experiences and accessing university services from a diversity of location, so from their workplace, from their home, from elsewhere, rather than having sort of one central point that they would be accessing university services?
Again, I don't have any firm statistics on it, but the vast majority of our students are indeed older students in the workforce and are likely to be accessing their learning from multiple locations.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I apologise, Mr Chairman, if the questions have already been asked as well. Can I just ask, please, Professor, have you got any particular courses in mind that require high-speed broadband to be delivered to your students? Like, are there models that are currently being developed?
Certainly, we would really love the opportunity to be able to access the high-speed networks for particular aspects of many of our courses. But if you focus on areas such as simulated learning environments for the health professions or for creative arts, these would be areas that would really benefit significantly from having additional speed and download availability.
Sure. And in your article where you say a compulsory connection to the high-priced NBN is a firewall for learning for many students, what do you mean by a compulsory connection? Because whilst NBN Co installs the wholesale element and the customer premises, the network termination device, it's not compulsory to actually take a retail service provided over the NBN. So I just want to be clear, when you say a compulsory connection to the high-priced NBN is a firewall, what do you mean by that?
If students wish to access higher education, particularly our students who are mostly online, then they need to have some connection. And if there's no copper system available, then they will need to access it through the NBN over the next few years as it's rolled out. So if they do wish to participate in higher education through an online environment, they will need to access it through an NBN.
Even though Telstra, although it's a commercial decision to offer broadband services over the copper network, Telstra will keep maintaining its copper network in areas where there's wireless and satellite being used. So does that still disadvantage your students, even though they'll still have access to a copper option?
My understanding was that copper is being removed progressively over the next few years, and then there won't be a choice to use the copper. If the copper is being maintained, then I think that will be terrific for students who would like to have a lower priced option.
Because the fixed wireless and satellite component, which is the minority component, the copper network will still be maintained in those areas. It will be a commercial decision whether to keep offering it.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
the other thing I wanted to just ask, you've got a statement about, sorry, I've just got two more questions. NBN prices are expected to remain high for the best part of a decade. Are you basing that on NBN Co, their corporate plan, or on retail pricing plans, or wholesale, the wholesale offerings?
On the NBN bundle pricing plans in their 2012 to 2015 business plan. Corporate plan, I'm sorry.
But when you say they remain high relative to...
ADSL 2 at the lowest level.
Okay, but ADSL 2 at the lowest level, the customer still has to pay at least an access fee, and some of those, the bundle plans under some of the retail service provider offerings are still quite low. Like, does that, and for a far superior product?
Well, if the price comparisons can be, are equivalent, then that would be fabulous. We'd love to be able our students to access the far superior product. I guess my overwhelming concern, and it may have got clouded with some of the discussion around specific pricing, is that there will be a tipping point where students who may choose not to continue with higher education if it becomes increasingly expensive, and that would concern me in terms of our students and indeed Australian requirements.
I just have a last question. You conclude your article by saying, in part, the NBN is not the solution. You talk about the need to ensure funding packages are in place to keep students online and so forth. When you say the NBN is not the solution, I guess two things. Firstly, you would concede there is a problem right now, and if NBN is not the solution, then what is? And why don't you think it was implemented a decade ago?
Thank you. I guess what I'm concerned about is to make sure that all students who aspire to getting a higher education degree are able to access NBN so that they can attain the rates of bachelor degree attainment that Australia needs and is specified in policy. So I'm just concerned that if we don't take into account particularly those students who are first in family and who are financially disadvantaged, and their potential tipping point with increasing costs of accessing education, then we might lose a whole group of Australians that we would like to actually attain a bachelor's degree.
But wouldn't you think that by rolling out the NBN and providing sorry, I'm looking for a word, but it doesn't matter.
Sorry. To be clear, I think we're on the same. We're thinking the same thing. But what I guess I'm saying is that I would really like to find solutions to assist all of our students, even those who are financially disadvantaged, to ensure that they can maintain their education aspirations by utilising the NBN.
I'm sure no one would disagree with those sentiments, which is why the NBN's being built. But anyway. Sorry, I'll stop talking now because someone's in the chair. It's you. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Look, personally, I apologise. I haven't been here. There's been a few other events going on in the building, and
I know, I understand
some of the
that.
slower members take a bit longer to work it out.
No problem.
Yep, but thank you for coming to assist the committee.
It's a pleasure.
And I gather you did take one question on notice.
Yes.
And so if you could get that back to us by Tuesday the 23rd of October, that would certainly help the Secretariat.
Yes, I can do that, no problems at all, Chair, and I appreciate the invitation to come and speak, it's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll help. So, and if the committee has any further questions, I hope you're okay that through the Secretariat we'll get them to
It'll be a
you.
pleasure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I gather in my absence, bipartisanship's broken out. You've reached an agreement to conclude here, so the only thing I need to get is someone to authorise for publication, including publication in the parliamentary database, the proof of the transcript of evidence. Have we done that, given before it at the public hearing today? Thank you. And also the Telstra opening statement and submission 11 from Professor Jan Thompson as submissions, and then also as an exhibit, the peace of mind document from Tunstall. If someone could move that. Thank you, Deputy Chair. All resolved. Thank colleagues. I know it was a bit messy tonight, but appreciated it. And thank the witnesses who've been here and declare the public hearing closed. Thanks.
Downstairs in time?
Thanks for covering that.
No, that's all right, we're in time. Next time you give me any news, getting on the board.
You weren't part of... Oh.